They called her a troublemaker. They labeled her a nuisance. They slapped her with fines, doubled them when she protested, and installed cameras aimed directly at her windows. But Emily Sanders was no criminal. She was just working remotely, trying to make a living from her own home. HOA President Karen Brooks watched smugly as Emily pulled another bright yellow violation notice from her door. Karen's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "You're not above the rules," she had sneered. "If you don't like it, maybe you should live somewhere else." It wasn't just about the money. It was about control, power, and humiliation. Karen was abusing her authority to crush anyone who challenged her, and she believed she was untouchable. But what Karen didn't know was that Emily wasn't fighting alone. Cameras were rolling, allies were gathering, and evidence of Karen's abuse of power was piling up. Karen thought she was safe. She thought her title made her invincible. But when the truth came out, the fallout was more devastating than anyone could have imagined. But let's start at the beginning. Emily Sanders loved her cozy bungalow in the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could work remotely in peace, free from the noise and chaos of a traditional office. She cherished her home office, decorated with potted plants and soft fairy lights, where she held Zoom meetings and brainstormed marketing campaigns. Life was good. At least it was until the Homeowners Association, HOA, took over, led by Karen Brooks, a woman notorious for her rigid rules and relentless power trips. One morning, Emily stepped outside to retrieve her mail, feeling the crisp morning breeze and enjoying the serenity of her little street. But her heart sank when she saw the official-looking envelope with bold letters. Notice of violation. She ripped it open, her eyes widening as she read the accusation. Running a business from home, followed by a $500 fine. Her stomach churned. What business? She wasn't running a shop or holding public meetings. She was just working remotely, like millions of others. She stared at her laptop inside the window, now feeling like it was incriminating evidence. Determined to resolve the misunderstanding, Emily marched to the HOA office. It was a cold, sterile place that smelled faintly of disinfectant. Behind the desk sat Karen, arms crossed, lips pursed tightly. Her eyes held no warmth, only authority. "You're conducting business in a residential neighborhood. That's strictly prohibited," Karen declared, her voice devoid of empathy. "I'm working remotely. I don't have clients coming over. I'm just using my computer," Emily explained, trying to sound calm, even though her heart was racing. "Rules are rules," Karen responded coldly, her face unmoving. "We can't have our neighborhood turning into a commercial district. Either you cease your activities, or you'll continue to receive fines." Emily felt a wave of indignation. This was absurd. But before she could argue, Karen cut her off. "The decision is final, and if you continue to challenge it, we'll double the fines." Her tone was icy, her eyes unyielding. Humiliated and enraged, Emily left the office, her face flushed with anger. This wasn't just about the money. It was about her right to work from her own home. She wasn't breaking any laws, and she wasn't disturbing anyone. Why was she being punished? As she sat at her desk, her laptop now seemed like a symbol of defiance. She realized she couldn't back down. This wasn't just a battle with Karen. It was a fight for her freedom. As she looked out the window, she felt a chill run down her spine. The neighborhood didn't feel as safe and cozy as it once did. She wondered how far Karen was willing to go to enforce her twisted version of community harmony. Emily took a deep breath, her determination solidifying. She wouldn't let Karen bully her, not in her own home. The next morning, Emily opened her front door and felt her stomach drop. Another bright yellow notice was taped to her door, flapping in the breeze like a warning flag. This time, the fine had doubled to $1,000, and the letter was even more threatening, warning of legal action if she didn't cease all commercial activities. Attached was a photo of her house with her office window circled in red ink labeled "Evidence of Unauthorized Business." Emily's heart raced. Who took this picture? Her private space was being monitored, scrutinized. As she stepped outside, her eyes scanned the neighborhood, and then she saw it. A new surveillance camera mounted high on a streetlight, its cold, unblinking eye aimed directly at her house. Her skin prickled with unease. How could they do this? How was this even legal? Her anger bubbled over. She stormed back to the HOA office, her fists clenched, determination burning in her chest. This time, Karen wasn't alone. Beside her sat the HOA's lawyer, his smug grin making Emily's blood boil. "The cameras are for community security," he stated coolly, his voice dripping with false justification. "Security? It's pointed directly at my window. This is an invasion of privacy." Emily's voice shook with indignation. "We're just protecting the neighborhood," Karen replied with a saccharine smile. Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Maybe if you weren't conducting business, you wouldn't feel so paranoid." Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't about rules or regulations. It was a calculated power play. Karen was using the HOA's authority to harass her, to intimidate her into submission. Emily realized then that playing by the rules wouldn't work. She needed allies. She needed evidence. She started knocking on doors, talking to neighbors. It didn't take long to find others who were targeted too. Tom, a retired consultant, and Lisa, a stay-at-home mom who freelanced online. They had received similar notices, but fear of retaliation kept them quiet. With Emily's encouragement, they agreed to fight back. Tom helped her install security cameras of her own to document the surveillance, while Lisa reached out to a lawyer specializing in homeowners' rights. They were no longer alone. Meanwhile, Karen's campaign grew more vicious. At the next community meeting, she stood in front of the crowd, her voice dripping with condescension as she accused Emily of disturbing the neighborhood's harmony. She painted Emily as a troublemaker, a nuisance. Rumors began to spread. Whispers about loud meetings, about strangers constantly coming and going. None of it was true, but the damage was done. Emily could feel the judgmental glances from neighbors as she walked her dog or took out the trash. But Emily refused to back down. Not now. She had allies, and together they were gathering evidence. She was done playing the victim. Karen had picked the wrong person to mess with. Emily, Tom, and Lisa were no longer just neighbors. They were allies, united by a common enemy and a shared sense of injustice. Their homes had become command centers, filled with notebooks, printouts, and laptops displaying surveillance footage. Determined to expose Karen's abuse of power, they meticulously documented every detail. Emily's new security cameras captured damning evidence. Karen's assistant, lurking near her property, adjusting the angle of the HOA's surveillance camera to peer directly into her office window. One evening, they even recorded him taking pictures through her window, a blatant invasion of privacy that made Emily's skin crawl. It was no longer just about the fines. It was about the violation of her personal space, her sanctuary. Lisa's lawyer confirmed their suspicions. Karen's actions were illegal. Not only were the surveillance cameras invasive, but the fines themselves were baseless. A thorough examination of the HOA's bylaws revealed that there was no rule against remote work. Karen had been exploiting a gray area to target residents she personally disliked. This wasn't about preserving the neighborhood's harmony. It was a vendetta. Emily felt a wave of anger and resolve. Karen had crossed a line, and now she was going to face the consequences. Realizing they needed more than just evidence, they needed public support, Emily and her allies decided to go public. Lisa reached out to a local news station, and soon a reporter was standing on Emily's front lawn, microphone in hand, broadcasting the story of how the HOA was spying on homeowners and issuing fraudulent fines. The segment went viral. Social media exploded with outrage, and public opinion turned against Karen. It was a small victory, but a powerful one. People were talking, and Karen's reputation was taking a hit. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. Under mounting pressure, she retaliated with more fines, even threatening Emily with a defamation lawsuit, claiming she was tarnishing the HOA's good name. The audacity made Emily's blood boil. Karen had spied on her, violated her privacy, and spread lies about her, yet she dared to play the victim? It only strengthened Emily's resolve. The next blow came when Emily's cameras captured Karen's assistant tampering with her mail and posting fake violation notices on her door. It was all caught on tape, undeniable evidence of harassment. But the most shocking discovery came from Tom's surveillance footage. Late one night, his cameras captured a secret meeting at Karen's house. There, she was heard plotting to cleanse the neighborhood of undesirables, specifically remote workers, and anyone who challenged her authority. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer about HOA rules. This was about power, control, and Karen's twisted sense of superiority. With a mountain of evidence and a surge of community support, Emily's lawyer filed a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, invasion of privacy, and abuse of power. News of the lawsuit spread like wildfire, drawing even more attention. Other neighbors came forward with their own horror stories of Karen's bullying tactics and fabricated fines. Her empire was crumbling, and she knew it. Emily stood on her porch one evening, looking out at her neighborhood with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. She was no longer alone. She was no longer a victim. She was fighting back, and she was winning. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras flashing, while neighbors packed the benches, their faces a mix of curiosity and righteous anger. Emily sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her lawyer's notes. Her heart raced, but her eyes were steady, focused on the front of the room where justice was about to be served. She glanced at Karen, who sat rigidly at the defense table, her head held high with false confidence. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist now looked smaller, vulnerable. The trial began, and the air grew tense. Emily's lawyer stood confidently before the jury, his voice echoing through the room as he presented the evidence. Video footage played on a large screen, showing Karen's assistant adjusting surveillance cameras to invade Emily's privacy. The footage zoomed in on him peering through her window, a violation so blatant that the courtroom erupted in murmurs of disbelief. The judge's eyes narrowed. The jury exchanged uneasy glances. Emily felt her pulse quicken. This was it, the moment the truth would finally come out. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Tom took the stand, his voice firm and unwavering as he recounted the secret meeting he had recorded. The audio played for the entire room to hear. Karen's voice was unmistakable, dripping with malice as she boasted about using HOA funds to install the surveillance cameras specifically to target Emily and anyone else who didn't fit her vision of the neighborhood. She laughed about the power she held, mocking the homeowners who feared her. The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock. Even Karen's lawyer looked shaken. Under oath, Karen tried to justify her actions, her voice faltering as she claimed she was protecting the community. But Emily's lawyer was relentless. He presented the HOA's own bylaws, which clearly stated that remote work was not prohibited. The fines were a fabrication, a tool Karen had used to control and harass residents. Caught in her own lies, Karen's facade crumbled. Her shoulders slumped and her eyes grew hollow. She knew it was over. The judge's gavel struck the wood, his voice firm and decisive. The defendant is found guilty of harassment, invasion of privacy, and abuse of power. The HOA is ordered to remove all surveillance cameras immediately. Karen Brooks is hereby removed from her position as president and fined for her unlawful actions. As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Neighbors who once feared Karen now celebrated her downfall. Some clapped, others hugged, and a few wiped tears from their eyes. Emily felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over her. She had stood up not only for herself, but for her community. She turned to her lawyer, who smiled warmly and whispered, "You did it." Karen stormed out of the courtroom, her face flushed with humiliation. Her reign of terror was over, and the neighborhood was free from her tyranny. The HOA was restructured under new leadership that promised transparency and respect for homeowners' rights. Emily returned to her home, her sanctuary, free to work remotely without fear of surveillance or harassment. Her victory became a symbol of hope and courage. Neighbors approached her with gratitude, inspired by her bravery. Her story spread, empowering others to stand up against injustice. Emily learned that even the most powerful bullies could be defeated when people stood together. As she sat at her desk, the sunlight streaming through her window, she smiled, knowing she had reclaimed her life, her privacy, and her freedom.